Welcome back. If it's Wednesday, somebody voted somewhere yesterday. And across the country, we got more evidence of former President Donald Trump's influence inside the Republican primary. South Carolina Republicans Nancy Mace and William Timmons both survived primary challenges helped by endorsements from the former president. Mace was facing a challenge backed by former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy that failed to get traction. Elsewhere, Congressman Kelly Armstrong, Trump's preferred candidate, won in the North Dakota gubernatorial primary. Armstrong beat the state's lieutenant governor, who had the backing of outgoing Governor Doug Burgum. And Sam Brown, who was endorsed by both the Republican establishment and Trump, won the Nevada Republican Senate primary. That win sets up a blockbuster matchup with incumbent Democratic Senator Jackie Rosen. Joining me now to break down these results and more is NBC News chief political analyst Chuck Todd. So, Chuck, thank you as always for being here. So these Republican primaries featuring Trump endorsements aren't really the ideological showdowns. We don't have sort of the establishment Republican going up against the Trump Republican anymore. They're sort of whoever Trump likes best gets the endorsement, but they're both kind of Trumpy. What's the significance of that?
Well, you know, it's interesting. You know, Mark Murray and I were discussing this, how the Republican Party feels like it's sort of in three parts, right? About half the party's MAGA. You know, they're not just for Trump, they're really into the Trump movement and all that. And then you have the other half of the party that's kind of divided. You have about a quarter of them that are never-Trumpers or flirting with never-Trumping, and they don't like this. This is your Romney wing. Maybe you put Mitch McConnell in here at times. And then you have this other quarter that is they're not big fans of Trump, but they're always going to be a Republican. Yeah. You know? And look, if half the party is Trump and then another quarter of the party is comfortable with him, I think that's why you're not seeing, you know, nobody wants to, in these lower turnout primaries, you're not going to win an ideological fight that is somehow not MAGA. So I do think it is interesting that you don't have to be in MAGA to survive if you can get the Trump endorsement.
Well, there's that, of course.
Because I don't see Kelly Armstrong, some of these other people, they're not very MAGA. But, you know, ditto and Nancy Mace, you don't know what she is on any given day. Yeah. So I don't know what to pretend. I know where she is in the Republican spectrum these days.
Well, to your point, the Trump endorsement has still a lot of power here. So what's your takeaway from last night?
Look, that's still the game in the party. And I think the question we all have is, what does that mean after he's gone? I mean, he is seen as the vote driver for the base. He is seen. And, you know, what's interesting is how much think about where we were 4 years ago and even 8 years ago, where you had down-ballot Republicans the ones that were going to be in competitive general elections, trying to do a dance with Trump. Now, you know, kind of wanting help where they thought they needed, but also a little bit of distance. You're not seeing that, whether it's in Nevada, you're not seeing it in Pennsylvania, places that 4 or 8 years ago you would have seen it. And so that, to me, has been more remarkable. And in some ways, Republican down-ballot candidates are more comfortable running with Trump than Democratic down-ballot candidates are right now and running with Biden.
It is remarkable to see that. You bring up Nevada, of course, Sam Brown, Republicans got the person that they wanted there. What do you make of that matchup with Jackie Rosen?
Look, I think the fact is Nevada's probably the blue state that is most vulnerable to becoming a red state. Demographically, it is, you know, it doesn't look like states that Democrats succeed in. Demographically, it looks more like a state. Republicans, more working class voters. It is a diverse state, and that has been, but we know that Republicans are making inroads with working class voters of color. I talked to somebody close to Biden world who said there's two states that keep him up at night. One's Michigan, the other one's Nevada. And I think that, and look, I'm a believer in one of these that as the presidential goes, so goes these Senate races.
There are also two other states where we're seeing an interesting trend, and that is Ohio and Pennsylvania. In both of those states, we see Senate candidates that are having a bigger lead than President Biden, who is trailing in many ways. What do you make of that trend? What does that say? And do you think it's more likely that Biden sort of catches up with these Senate candidates, or that these Senate candidates get dragged down?
Well, I think, look, let's look at the two unique natures of these Senate candidates, Bob Casey and Sherrod Brown. By the way, they both won their Senate seats the first time in 2006. They have established themselves as not progressive, okay? They've always been hugging, you know, somewhere in between. Sherrod Brown has always been sort of the working class. He's progressive on a few things, but he sort of has his own brand. Casey has his own brand. So I do think you have two incumbents that have their own established brand where they're seen as not Washington Democrats. Now, look, both of their Republican opponents are trying to turn them into Biden Washington Democrats. And I think if they succeed, it could give them both trouble. What's most likely? It's most likely that the Senate candidates fall to Biden rather than Biden rising up to where the Senate candidates are, particularly when you see these are right now. Look, it's good news that Sherrod Brown can run 10 points ahead of Biden. I promise you there's no chance he runs 10 points ahead of him on Election Day. He's got to hope Biden does well enough where running just 5 points ahead of Biden can win him the Senate seat. If he's got to win by run farther ahead, if he's got to run more than 5 points ahead of Biden, I don't think Brown can win. And that's with Casey, we're probably talking in the 2 to 4 point range.
And as we talk about the state of Ohio, that is, there's also this special House election in Ohio.
Right.
It ended up being closer than expected. What do you take away from that?
This has been a pattern in the Trump era, okay? And part of this is, you know, Republicans, before Donald Trump, Republicans used to overperform in special elections. And it was because they had more, the suburban voter in general is the most common voter to show up. And anywhere, and now that voter, instead of a Republican voter, they're more likely a Democratic voter. Democrats now have the more reliable voters. This is why Democrats want a lower turnout general election. They get a lower turnout general election advantage, Democrats. Right now, the voters who are less engaged, if they do vote, they vote Republican. That's why we've seen this pattern in special elections. I don't know. I would be careful overreading too much. I think this is simply the Democratic voter base is more aware of when elections are than the Republican voter base. That said, I believe that all polling has got, like, everybody was trying to was looking for the missing Trump voter, and now I think everybody might have overcorrected a little bit. Oh. So I have a sneaking suspicion that Democrats in general will run somewhere between 1 and 3 points ahead of most of the polling. Okay. Now, is 1 to 3 points enough to win? Depends on the state.
Yeah. Well, all interesting things to think about. Thank you so much, Chuck Todd.
Thank you, Yabish.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.